What does Andrew Tate have in common with JP Sears, my father, and C.S. Lewis? They all began to believe in God for essentially the same reasons. We're going to jump into that today. My name is Ryan Martin, and this is Unsafe Media, where I help you respond with wisdom and virtue to the ideas of our age. Now, the thing about wisdom and virtue is that they are not material entities, and yet they do exist. We all agree that they exist. We deeply feel in our bones when something is truly unjust, and we deeply feel in our bones when something is truly good and righteous. And that can only be accounted for, or rather I should say your worldview should be such that it can account for these types of entities. And if you're a materialist or an atheist, if you believe that only things exist that can be proven by the five senses, essentially de facto ruling out anything except for what is tangible and physical, then you simply cannot account for these. You're literally ruling them out of existence as an axiom of your overall view. Now, all of the men mentioned, including my own father, came to know that God existed simply by really reflecting on the nature of evil and depravity itself, that evil itself became evidence for God's existence. Let's jump in first to JP Sears, then to Andrew Tate, and then I'm going to try to clean up their arguments because they're not quite as precise as I think that they would want to be. While this is a criticism of the way they articulate themselves, I mean this only in the constructive sense. Help them try to put slightly more accurate and precise language around their view. Let's jump right in.
The presence of evil and Satan that evil emanates from has never been more obvious, at least in my lifetime. The past 3 years, evil isn't hiding anymore. It's coming at us through authoritarianism, movements, people, groups, companies, governments, trying to invade our minds, invade our God-given free will. So as that's become more obvious, I think there's a natural polarity that happens. If you're not someone who's willing to do the devil's bidding, if you're not someone who's willing to propagate evil, then there's a natural occurrence that happens when you're in the presence of evil. You polarize to the other extreme. Like you may not even be consciously aware of it, but the presence of evil makes you lean away.
Now, this is a really important argument that he's making here. If there's something that's bad, there must be something that's good, because bad only makes sense in relationship to the good. It's like the existence of a magnet. If there's a North Pole, there must be a South Pole.
And then, therefore, what direction are you leaning towards? That would be the direction of God, certainly the opposite of evil, the opposite of Satan. So I think that's seeing the presence of evil. That's why I've just accidentally been getting more Christian, why so many other people are, because right now I think the evil that's in this world is doing a great service of driving a lot of people to find God in ways that they previously hadn't.
Now let's go ahead and let's jump over here to Tate's supposed scientific argument.
I found scientific proof for God. I'm the man. Everyone's been sitting here, all the atheists saying there's no proof for God. I've got it.
Okay, let's stop.
Here's the scientific proof for God. I've got all of it. I think it's his third law. It might be his second. We'll have to look it up if it's third or second law. But one of Newton's law is that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. For every force, there's an equal and opposite force. Anyone who's perspicacious enough to look around them and sees the true evil in the world today understands that there must be an equal and opposite to that true evil, which is good, which means that God must be real. If all of the evil in the world today is the act of demons and devil, and people will try and pretend it isn't, but if you truly understood things like the elites making you miss your grandma's funeral to laugh at you, like
I believe it was Antonin Scalia, or he was one of the most brilliant jurists we've ever had on the Supreme Court. And being a Catholic, he mentioned something about the devil and this, supposed erudite man believing in the devil. Oh my goodness, how could he be so lowbrow? And he said, many people much smarter than you or I have long believed in the devil. There's a great reason to believe in him. We'll get back to that though.
Because of a psyop on the Disney Channel. When you truly understand the level of evil in the world today, then you must understand the only equal and opposite force can be God.
All right, so first, Tate's is a little bit easier to critique because the way we conceive of science today is really physical science. We're talking about the nature of the physical world, the tangible. And so that doesn't apply to intangible realities, right? So Newton's laws don't apply to the moral realm. They apply specifically to the physical realm. But he's getting at what JP was getting at earlier, and this is important, is that the very concept of good, the very concept of bad implies good. Bad by nature essentially means not good. So the instant that you have something that you can identify as evil or as bad, you're immediately and inescapably implying that there must be some sort of objective measurement of good. When I say objective, I mean it's not depending on person to person. If you want to say Hitler was evil, Well, in his eyes, he wasn't evil, right? So it's your opinion versus his. There has to be somebody beyond the two subjects, you and Hitler, that can arbitrate between you. There must be some sort of standard that you appeal to. If I have a ruler, two rulers, and they disagree, I need the official ruler at the Bureau of Weights and Measures to come in and arbitrate between the two. We need an official standard of what is good. And again, good is not a physical thing. So there must be some sort of immaterial standard of all goodness. And beyond that, this standard, because they keep saying the opposite of evil is God, and I want to try to help you understand why that is. This standard not only is an immaterial being, it has to be the standard by which it has to be good. All right, so now we have an immaterial good. I make the contention that only persons can be good, that goodness in itself is not a thing. Goodness is only an attribute of a thing. Similarly, red is not a thing, but it is an attribute of other things. So you can have a red apple, but you can't have redness by itself. And in the same way, you can only say a person is good. So I'm making the case now that we need an immaterial good that is a person, because only persons are good. And finally, this entity would have to be able to place obligations on us, again reinforcing its personhood. Gravity doesn't place the obligation on us to stay planted on the earth. We're not breaking any laws whenever we fly. Gravity, thermodynamics, these place no obligation on us. We're under no duty to do these things, but we are under the obligation to love our neighbor as ourselves. We're under the obligation to raise and rear our children to be virtuous and wise and not be foolish. We're under the obligation to not harm one another. We have these obligations. What could place an obligation on us and on all people? Again, Hitler violated those obligations. So there must be some authority beyond individuals, beyond the individual subjects, that is the objective person upon whom we are all now reliant for our moral duties. Now, that person themselves would be the supreme subjective. They would be a person, and persons are subjectives, but simply to say that they would be the one in the ultimate, that their authority is legitimate. This is God. And when you talk about a lawgiver, you're talking about, for all humanity, you're talking about the Judeo-Christian view of God. And maybe you want to go, well, but there's thousands and thousands of other entities, of other supposed gods. Yes, but almost none of them are conceived to be the ultimate reality that exists outside of space and time, that is able to place moral obligation on all people at all times. So those visions of God simply fail because they don't account for the evidence we're talking about, which is an immaterial standard of good that places obligations on all people at all times. And this is what we call the moral argument for God's existence. That's it for today. This is Unsafe Media, and I am Ryan Martin. If you're the kind of person who has not joined my Patreon, you're probably also the kind of person who says, on one hand, slavery is evil, and on the other hand, there's no such thing as right and wrong. Think that through a little bit. Then join my Patreon. Then like, share, subscribe, all the other things. And until next time, trust God and keep your powder dry.